Welcome to the In Her Power podcast. My name is Kerri-Ann. I'm an empowerment coach, a Reiki master, and a yoga teacher. But most importantly, I am a human being and a spiritual being just like you. I started this podcast to bring more awareness, more tools, and more resources to help you feel more in your power, to live a more expansive life. Now, I've been doing this journey of personal growth and development for over 10 years now. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm a junkie. But because of this work, I have a huge expansive life, which is just amazing. And the reason why I do it is not because I want to make my life more amazing. The reason why I do it and why I do this podcast and why I do the work is I want to help more amazing women like yourself live a more authentic life, feel more in their power, in your power, and feel more expansive, okay? So if you're here listening to this podcast, then I imagine you are curious to learn more. Or maybe you feel stuck and you don't know where to start. Or maybe you have had this kind of itching feeling, that little ping in the back of the mind of like, wow, there's got to be more out of life than what's currently unfolding for me. So I'm going to say, embrace the curiosity. Embrace the curiosity that is wanting to emerge here and step into your expansiveness. In this episode, I talk with my dear friend Kyra, who I actually met, and she'll tell you, through a retreat that I did. I didn't know her very well. But what I love about Kyra's story, it's kind of like an eat, pray, love. Her version of it, where she does travel. And I just want to say that if you really resonated with Kyra's story, it doesn't mean you have to go out on your own kind of journey in terms of traveling around the world like Kyra did. You can go on your own journey even from your own home in your backyard. So keep that in mind as you listen to my conversation with Kyra, and I really, really hope you enjoy it. Okay, I'm really excited about this episode because I'm here with Kyra Giri, and we just had this conversation offline about her pronunciation of her last name. So hopefully I got it right. But the point being is that I wanted to do some episodes of my new podcast, In Her Power, to talk about with like, they're all real women I'm talking with, but women who are on the journey that are more maybe relatable to my audience, about the process they have gone through or are going through in terms of standing in their power. And I thought Kyra would be great because just the backstory a little bit. I met Kyra 3 years ago now, a little over 3 years ago here in Brazil through an international group. And I had decided at that time that I wanted to like try out hosting a retreat to see if I like wanted to really be in this work and kind of dabble in it. So I pulled 7 women together, including myself, and brought them to the mountains for a weekend of connecting with nature, connecting with themselves, and connecting with other women. And through that, I met Kyra. We had met before, but I got to know her on a deeper level. And she had a really transformative experience through that, which was kind of mind-blowing for me because I was like, oh, I'm just dabbling in this. So it's kind of cool to see. And I won't tell you all the story because that's why she's here, to really tell her story. But I wanted to just kind of share a little bit about how I know Kyra, and really start the conversation about her journey into stepping into her power more. So welcome, Kyra, to my show.
Thanks, Kerri-Ann. I'm so happy to be here with you. This is great.
Yeah, and Kyra, by the way, is in Canada. So we got 2 continents. Whoop, whoop. And we're doing this during our quarantine time. So if the internet goes up and down, just bear with us. It's the process. It's the journey we're all on. So Kyra, I wanted to start with it was a question I've never asked you actually. When it came to that retreat and kind of, why did you decide to go on the retreat? Like, what was calling to you at that time?
Good question. I don't know if this sounds, however it sounds, maybe flaky, or some people may or may not be able to relate to this, but I really do make a lot of decisions based on intuition. And so if something, comes on my path or an opportunity comes up, and especially if it's something that feels like very serendipitous or like a synchronicity kind of occurrence, then I'll usually get curious with it and explore it. And I remember meeting you when we did a race. It was like a through that international group. We had all done this big group relay, and I had just moved to Rio de Janeiro to do an assignment for this corporation I was working with for a few months. And so I was definitely eager, one, to build community, and two, you and I had exchanged information, or you'd gotten my information somehow, and you just randomly reached out to me and extended this invite. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, this sounds, my first instinctual kind of response was like, yeah, I'm in. And so I like to follow that, right? If it feels easeful and it feels like this is what I need and what I want, then yeah, I just went for it. And I love hiking. I love moving my body. I love being outside. I love travel, of course. That's why I accepted a position in Rio de Janeiro. And so the opportunity to get out of the city was a big part of it. And then also, I hadn't done a lot of stuff in women's groups or just with women. And I had, for about 4 to 5 months leading up to that point, had really kind of stepped away from dating at that point in my life and was trying to like connect more with my feminine self. So it just seemed like, like that synchronistic kind of invitation.
Cool. Well, I will tell you, my audience probably will resonate with following your intuition for sure, because I am all about that. That's just like true power right there.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about, now I've heard this story, but obviously those listening haven't. Like, what happened for you during that retreat?
Yeah. So again, like those few, I mean, this is just some context, but the few months before going to Brazil, like I said, I had kind of started to make some agreements with myself that I wanted to just kind of like start to tweak some of my normal behaviors in my life, because I was feeling like something was off inside. And like maybe I think that was when I was starting to realize like that I was having some patterns that weren't serving me. Like it wasn't the outside world that was doing something to me. It was maybe how I was making my choices that needed to be different, because I was, butting my head up against a few different like personal issues over and over again. And so that's the context. And so on the retreat, when I went, I knew that, there was some tender places inside of me that I had been trying to figure out. And then when we did the long hike, and I remember it was kind of like a stormy weather, and there was a lot of like vulnerable sharing in between the women, and I just could feel my emotions really coming out to the surface. And then you guided us. Then the next morning you had a little yoga practice that you guided us through, and then you did this guided meditation, and it just literally felt like I just got cracked open. Like I think the combination of getting to know the women before and creating that, knowing that it was a safe space, and also like just how emotional I felt, and then being guided, and obviously I must have been able to surrender during that meditation somehow. And I just remember totally all of this emotion just like coming out. It was like I had all this stuff going inside and I hadn't really been expressing it. I think I was containing and containing and containing a lot. So yeah, I mean, it was just, it literally is like you get cracked open a little bit and just give yourself permission to just ball my face off essentially, and feel safe, and also be in an environment where it was like encouraged almost.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then what steps did you take after that? Like yeah, just kind of what was your journey, your river, your flow?
So after that is when I started meditating. So it was like, okay, it wasn't that I wasn't emotional, it's that I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. And so that's when I started following one of my main meditation teachers, who, like, I've been loyal to her since then. Actually, one of the women on the retreat told me about her. Her name's Kyra. And so I started literally that very next day meditating, trying to meditate every morning before I was going into the office, and then also journaling about the experience. And I mean, I have all these journals, and that particular one, I know it would be almost terrifying to look back at, because I think I just was divulging so much, like just,
Mm.
rinsing of so much of my emotional landscape into those pages. And so yeah, getting into meditation, um, really finding a refuge in being present and being okay with where I was. I think that I was in some emotional distress that A, hadn't been tending to, and B, was kind of trying to run away from, by, doing whatever distracted behaviors. Um, and so, yeah, just being with myself and being a lot connected and okay, just, having that safe refuge within myself and not needing to control anything in the outside as much.
Mhm. Beautiful. Beautiful. I was going to say, when you think about this idea of being in your power, what does that mean for you now compared to back then?
Well, it's funny because like that it's been a couple years, and I've had some like huge ups and downs since then. Like the hardest year probably of my life happened last year. Well, the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019. And so when I try to remember what I was like before, it's almost like it seems like she's a different person. Or it's almost hard to recall. But I think standing in my power, I think through all of this, like, these cycles that I've gone through, is like really embracing who I am. Like, I think I went into a place where I investigated all parts of myself, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think I started hurting myself with some of the, like, maybe more negative sides. Like, we all have a shadow side. We all have, when things that we might do or say when we're hurting or stressed out, or, going through trauma or whatever. And so I think now I've come onto the other side, where I've gone through a period of just, yeah, embracing all parts of myself and accepting who I am and showing up way more authentically. Like yesterday, I hosted a yoga session, and the intention that I offered to the group was free to be me. And
Mm.
I just talked a little bit about, I provided an anecdote of my own experience of really, we all have an authentic self. And sometimes somewhere along the way, it gets lost or we get disconnected from it. And our authentic self is usually not anything to do with our external identifiers. It's like, who are you in your spirit? Are you like strong and unwavering, like a tree in a storm, or are you like more like an ebb and flow, like a wave, or are you more like a little pack of fireflies, like play fighting and bopping and weaving, which by the way is probably what my spirit would look like. um and yeah, so standing in my power is just like getting back to like who I really am, and just embracing it and
Mhm.
showing up in the world as that,
Yep.
instead of, you know, trying to be something else, or trying to be what other people might want, or seeing things through a lens of fear.
Yep. Yeah, beautiful. You've come to this kind of place, or have arrived here through what I'm going to call, using Elizabeth Gilbert's journey, Eat, Pray, Love. I mean, from a whole change in job to traveling to stepping into some really deep relationships and hard relationships to really look at yourself. Can you speak a little bit about the journey? And I know for everyone it's going to be different. And this was the path
Absolutely.
you chose. Yep.
Yeah. Um, I think my journey has been following my heart, and it's not easy to follow your heart.
Why is
That's
that for you? Why would you
um because well, for me, to follow my heart meant I had to uh release a bunch of these anchors that I had in my life and a few relationships. So I knew I wanted to go explore the world and connect with myself on a level that I wasn't able to do in my, usual comfort zone, with my usual community, in my usual apartment, in my usual job. And so for me, I made the decision to sell my place I was living in, and there was an opportunity to actually volunteer to get packaged out or laid off from this company that I was working with while I was in Brazil, because they actually sold the business in Canada where I was a permanent employee with. And I had pets, so I wanted to follow my heart. I wanted to go travel, but you can't fit cats in a backpack. So I had to make that choice to
You
foster them
can.
out. I mean,
It
I
might not be
could, but it
comfortable
wouldn't be
for
very
them.
Yeah, so it was kind of, it felt like a discarding or a running away at the time, and potentially some of it was because I had realized that I wanted something differently, and then I just went full steam ahead to try and do it.
Mm-hmm.
What was your question? What
No,
is
just
this?
your eat, pray, love journey, and
Oh yeah.
I mean, you left the corporate world that you had built upon, because from what I remember, it didn't resonate with you anymore,
Yeah.
and
It
you
just
went
didn't feel like
journey.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
And like the relationships that I was pursuing didn't feel like enough at that time, making those choices as well. It was like, I'm not feeding my soul in the way that it wants to be fed. And I don't know what it is, but I just need to go and go out there in the world and be free. I felt really anchored by a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is, sold my place, sold everything. My friend Janice calls it, Marie Kondoing my life. It just was like giving everything away. I was like, yeah, no, go ahead, like take it all. And so first I went over to Asia, and I spent most of the time in India. I was there for 4 months. And I was literally training and bussing around. I saw 8 different states and explored some of Delhi territory by train and bus mostly. I think I took 2 flights in that 4 months. So that was just such a gift to myself to have that time to think and just observe something so completely different outside of myself. And I did a huge trek in Nepal, which is called the Annapurna Circuit, which was one of the most outstanding experiences I've had. It was like you're hiking around these 3 Annapurna mountains, and it's a circuit. So you do reach some high altitudes, you do climb high at some points, but it's not as hard as some really tall hikes. Mm-hmm. It's more like you're just walking through a lot of different diversity in religion and nature and landscapes. And that in itself was like a giant moving meditation for about 16 days. I was walking on the Annapurna Circuit.
Yeah. Nice.
It was cool. And then came back and spent 3 months in my hometown. I grew up in a really unique part of Canada. It's very remote. It's on the border of Alaska and far northwest British Columbia.
It's got a population of 300.
Yeah, 400-ish people.
So
my parents have always lived there. So came back to Calgary, flew back to Calgary, picked up my car, drove the 2 days to my hometown, and spent 3 months there. And that in itself was just such a nice, kind of soulful experience too. Mm-hmm. And actually literally the day I got there, I ended up meeting someone who randomly or serendipitously was working in the town, and we got into a relationship, which was quite a trying part of my journey.
Lots of growth.
And I go back and forth between was that all a mistake, or was it a case of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. And this force of a man came into my life, and I learned a lot in that relationship, and a lot about what I'm not willing, where I'm not willing to go, what kind of relationship what type of relationship I'm actually not up for.
Yep. I think sometimes on the journey, you have to almost give up your power to realize how to take it back. Does that make sense? Unconsciously giving it up, thinking you have the power, and then realizing, actually, I'm going to take that back, and I'm going to always have it. Does that make
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I mean, a big part of what I haven't mentioned is that I had a head injury shortly after that initial women's retreat with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a severe concussion and a brain bleed called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. And I mean, I'm smiling now just because, again, it's like, I can't believe that all happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also a big catalyst for, it's like I knew something was off. And then when I had the brain injury and ended up being off work for a few months, and that was the first kind of huge chunk of time I had by to myself without having, my corporate entity and that attachment involved in my life. That was kind of a big catalyst for, okay, something going on here I need to tend to inside my heart.
Mm-hmm. What I loved about that, because of course I knew about it, was it provided you the space. It's kind of like how I see this, like self-isolation quarantine right now. It's like putting us in our safe space in our homes to give us the opportunity, if we choose, to do inner work. And
Mm-hmm.
you had this opportunity where you were getting paid and like had to be in a safe space. I mean, you couldn't, if I remember correctly, you couldn't look at phones, you couldn't read anything,
No screens.
no screens. Like we would have to just get on a little call, but you're like, I can't really look at the screen.
Yeah, like let's
No
send
video.
audios.
Yeah, no video, no pictures. But it helped you fully detach from that kind of that stimulation to go in and inward and feel. And it was like,
Exactly.
in some ways, as much as it was painful, and I looked at it, and I don't know if you looked at it this way, it was a gift.
It was a gift. It was time and space. It was an excuse to take a break from normal life, just similar to what's happening right now with this
Mhm.
pandemic.
Mhm.
It's like you don't have I didn't have these obligations.
Yep.
And the amazing thing about mindfulness and meditation, which of course I was doing a lot. I mean, I joked with this woman I met in India because I was like, am I enlightened? I've had all these, epiphany feelings where I'm so present sometimes and I really feel liberated from a lot of my suffering in moments. And I explained to her that how much I was meditating in the bathtub when I first had my head injury. And that was really where, these shifts were starting to happen. And she's like, she was like, no, you became enlightened in your bathtub in Canada. It had nothing to do with you coming to India. Because while I was in India, I did an 11-day silent insight meditation course, which hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but highly recommend to anyone. Again, if you want to take a break from your life. And the reason it's so powerful is, yeah, you're spending time with yourself, but you're not allowed to have any distractions. So you're not on screens. You're not even allowed to have like a writing utensils or paper or anything like that. You're just totally with yourself. And that is what happens when you're, pursuing meditation and mindfulness. You're not in that distracted place. And then your senses actually open up
Mhm.
so much more. And I remember, because I had those, 3 or 4 months where I wasn't on screens when I was first healing in 2017. The first time I went out for a bike ride and looked at the Rocky Mountains, it was like, oh, I can't believe how pristine and clear everything looks. It was like I was seeing the mountains for the first time. It was like I was having a rebirth again.
Mhm.
And yeah, so if there's any like little nuggets of inspiration for people to go try meditation or even just like be curious about a practice, it's that opportunity to kind of enliven your senses.
What I also love about what happened with your head injury is, I imagine at least most of the time you didn't step into victim, like, oh, poor me, versus you stepped into empowering yourself, like, how can I best use this time to support myself, versus sitting in this, oh, I've got this head injury, it's miserable, I can't read a screen, I can't connect with anyone, my life is miserable. I think some people feel that way now, going through this kind of self-isolation quarantine or even social distancing. It's like, life could be terrible and it's so hard. Yeah, my kids are at home, I have to work full time, I also have to teach them, instead of looking at the gift that is been being given to you. Does that make sense? And how
Absolutely.
and that's also taking your power back and going, wait, I can control this situation, the box I'm in. I can do whatever I want in the box, and I always think
Yeah, I
about
remember.
Nelson Mandela's story, 27 years in prison, and he, in the end, he chose not to be the victim of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first had the injury, because I was in Brazil when it happened, and the doctor at the private clinic was really concerned with, of course, stopping the brain bleed. And there was no discussion about a concussion or rehab or post-trauma stress or emotional change from having a head injury. And so I really, at first, because I didn't understand and I wasn't getting enough guidance or asking the right questions, I was really thinking I was just going to go back to normal life. And then when I came back to Calgary and talked to my doctor, I tried to go back to work, and I remember feeling completely off and negative, which is so not me. By nature, I'm very optimistic. And I was just like, I can't do this. And I went to my doctor, and she was like, you have you had a very serious head injury, and you've got a major concussion. So just go home for 4 months minimum and don't look at screens and just heal and, do this concussion physio and etc. And then at that moment, I gave myself permission to surrender. But I mean, that's the biggest part. Like, we are our own worst, like, we create our own resistance, and being able to surrender over and over again to our new realities is a huge challenge. And I think I really empathize with a lot of people that are probably going through that with this pandemic. Is, you know, you we ask for catalysts for change, and sometimes they're just forced on us, and then we are really have to, pull up our resiliency and resourcefulness on how to cope, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I would say, yeah, I did a good job not being a victim then. However, I did go through a phase last year when I left that relationship that I was in and had just done all of this really intense personal development work on Vancouver Island. And then something else happened in my personal life that's pretty, like, close to my heart. And it just felt like, I remember for a few months feeling a bit victim-y, like, why can't I get a break?
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
you remember that? Remember that I
I
said to
totally
you, like,
remember
remember
that.
that year I cried and you were there every day we talked? Like, I'm
Yep.
pretty sure we
Yep.
talked for
Yep.
hours most days.
Yep.
And it was just like, I want my old life, going back and forth, like, I want my old life back, or I'm beating myself up for these discoveries I've made in this personal development work, or, and a lot of it was probably just grieving that relationship, I thought it was going to be, and then having to leave it. I also was, by the way, kind of stranded on Vancouver Island. I had my car, but I just left this relationship and it was really intense, and yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So
Hey,
we
I've
learn a
been
lot
there.
in the hard
Yep.
times. It's not just been totally easy.
No. And here's the thing, it's not like you're never going to step back into that drama triangle, into that victim mentality. The more that we do this work and we have the tools, the more that we can go, wait, let me step back into my power. You just saw me 9 months ago go through a hard uh, ending of a relationship. And how long did I stay also in victim? And part of it was grieving, and part of it was I have to go through the process of feeling the hatred so I could get to the forgiveness part and get it all out of my
Absolutely.
system. So we're human. That's the beautiful thing. And this work, it's not like a light switch. It's like, once you know it, it's just you switch on and you're good to go. It's a constant process and evolution. And I wouldn't say that I'm always in my power. I'm in my power the more that I'm aware and conscious, the more that I start shifting my perspective and get outside of the drama triangle, or outside of my own prison that I put myself in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest, another big catalyst for change, and why I think I'm so much more stable now. I'm the most stable I've been in years, I'd say. Like, I just feel I'm at the right balance between, I tend to my emotional interior, and I'm participating in the external world, because for a while I was kind of totally in the inside and in my head, and
Mm-hmm. Yep.
in that going between embodiment and feeling everything, but also, you know, indulging in some of the thinking. And now I'm quite balanced. And I did a yoga teacher training in September in Guatemala, and, you know, went into it thinking like, yeah, I might want to teach. And then, of course, you get into the training and it's like, oh my gosh, this is totally nerve wracking because it's so hard. And, you know, I have so much respect for teachers now that I know how intense it is to be able to cue and learn the body and be able to provide, you know, supportive assists and do all the breath work, not to mention all of this crazy Sanskrit vocabulary that you,
Yes.
you learn and all of the history. And after that training, I started teaching, you know, right away, like the day after or 2 days after the training, I went back to Antigua and was staying in a hostel, and these German girls asked me to give them a class. And the one ended up having, she's new to yoga, and, you know, I like to provide a holistic practice. So not just the asana or the postures, but, you know, some guided meditation and some breath, and usually some sort of like encouragement of self inquiry, either through like creating a theme or sharing something about myself and my own journey. And she had this moment at the end where she was just like, I'm really emotional and I don't know what this is. And I just remember my heart just flooding with love.
Yeah.
And I was so present. It was like, I was just like squarely in loving and oneness. And I don't know how that sounds, but it's like, I have like goosebumps just thinking about it. And so since then, you know, I've been trying to teach yoga as much as possible, and I'm now, you know, doing some stuff online. But it really is that giving back, like keep getting healthy, and now being in a place where I'm healthy enough to give back to others, that I think is why I'm really in my power too.
What's beautiful about that story is that it sounds like you supported her with connecting to her authentic self. And that's a really powerful place. And of course, a lot of emotion comes up because it's like, wow, when you kind of realize you've come home, even if you just get a taste of home and then it goes away, it's so, because I felt that at the retreat, you know, that I did for you. And I feel that a lot with a lot of my work with my clients when they really step into their authenticity. It's like, holy crap, it just feels like my heart feels so open. It is so amazing. And it's unbelievable. It's because you're connected now with them energetically because they're so open. Even if it's just for that few minutes, it's so beautiful.
And that's what you provided for me in that retreat. It was that space, and that, you know, you facilitated this experience. And of course, it's the student too who is in the right place in the right time. Again, I believe in that serendipity or that synchronicity of energies and relationships and people meeting and different things like that. And it's really amazing, and to help people plant those seeds.
It is. Something that might resonate with people is your journey to, I'm going to say what you're meant to do. So finding that the purpose or your why, because I know you've been exploring it, and for a while there, you really like, I just want it, you know. And I actually have clients that go through this, right? I have many clients that just like want their why, and I think part of it is we want our identity. We want something to identify with, or how we will identify ourselves into the outer world.
Really.
And I know you're still in that process of exploring it and kind of getting closer and closer. So how do you feel now, especially when we talk about being in your power and in your truth, compared to like those moments when you were like, this sucks. Why can't I find it? What's wrong with me?
For sure. I mean, I have a lot of compassion, I'd say, towards myself, because although I was judging myself as spinning my wheels, and probably to people on the outside, they're just like, oh my gosh, you change your mind like a gorilla swinging all over the place. I have compassion for myself because I was being curious. I was getting really curious. I was looking around the world and reaching out. You know, I was I volunteered in a few, like I volunteered in India, I volunteered in Guatemala to see, what fit there. I had conversations with someone in the UN and in Africa, thinking maybe that's something I wanted to look at there. Talking to other people about their experiences working for the UN, it's like, do I want to go back to corporate? Is it too bureaucratic? Is that really going to be the change that I want to be part of? Dabbled back into looking at, into an old career that's more aligned with what I used to do. Um, and yeah, I just have compassion. I think if you don't, for me, I need to go and see if it's something I don't want, so I would have that satisfied, or else I might always be wondering.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then now, I mean, everyone always says, like, everything you read about, like, finding your true, finding your passion is about using your true nature. And so, because I was a bit separated from, because I went through some dark times, like, my true nature is being very light and being, like a ball of energy, and being really optimistic and encouraging. And I think in those times where I was feeling really low and disconnected from myself, maybe that's when I was the hardest on myself,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't, in alignment. And now that I'm, back, the new back, um, yeah, I think, I just kind of launched this little business called, and the name will probably change, but I just named it Community Wellness with Kyra. And what it is providing meditation and yoga and some wellness tools. So what I want to do is take, like, everything that I learned in all this, growth and journeying and professional development that I paid a lot of money for, from coaching to group work, to, really extensive programs on self-exploration and conflict resolution and conscious communications, and also my yoga teacher training and all the meditation courses and stuff I've done. I kind of want to distill it down and make it accessible for the general public, and especially for any, like, marginalized groups or groups that might not otherwise be able to afford it or get access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so I've just kind of started this I just put, like, a Facebook business page together and have started running some, for the moment, free sessions online. And just starting
You
to
are
connect with
asking people to donate to
while
local.
also, yes. So I love giving back. So I'm really encouraging people to, if it's within their means, of course, to donate even any amount to a local charity in their area. And so we have this really awesome comprehensive list of charities in Calgary, which I provide in the invitations, to say, like, here, I'll make it easy. Here's the list. And a few people have donated, and it's really awesome. And my long-term plan, or what I love to do, and I've got to do some market research, is find a way to create a little wellness entity that's a nonprofit, and see if I can get it, like, services subsidized by the government or investors, and to be able to put on programs for groups.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What I love about it is that I think when you decide to surrender and allow yourself to dabble in so many different areas, in essence, then you expand your mind to what's possible. We sometimes get so narrow to what's out there is only possible, and that's not true. Or what's the main trend, or this is how it should be done. And we don't give ourselves an opportunity to see, wait, I could do something differently. I think for two reasons, maybe three. One, we're looking for an identity. We want to identify with something, and we want to see it in the mirror. So we want to see someone else in that position or space and kind of be like that. Two, we want to belong. And so what's already out there created in whatever space, there's a lot of maybe community or connection, or what's the word, like following, that is, oh, I'm going to follow the herd because I want to belong. And then two, we do it out of pure survival. Like, we know, well, that there's proof that works, so I should do it like that. So I should be the teacher, or I should be the lawyer, or I should be a yoga teacher like this, versus allowing ourselves to think outside the box and do it differently, and creating something so magnificent, and then having people come along and join us. And so we have our community, we belong, etc.
Yeah.
It can be very scary, but it's more powerful. And I think about Martin Luther King. I mean, he just kind of he just kind of stood there, with such a strong message, and then people just kind of came in, and he had this dream, which is phenomenal in terms of even that speech and how he wrote it and whatnot. And then
Yeah.
what happened, what was great, um, after his assassination, was that people continued doing it. It didn't stop with him because it wasn't about him. And so even the work that you're doing, it's not about you. You are the conduit, you're the guide. And just like me, is I don't look at myself as a healer. I look at myself as, let me help you facilitate your healing. You're the healer.
Yeah, it's like being a connector.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think, speaking of Martin Luther King, like that's such a great example of, and I've got friends right now who are getting into coaching. And, it's like, how do I, build my business, and how do I get audiences? And like the biggest thing is just there's going to be an audience for whoever you are. Be your most authentic self, really understand yourself, stay true to your message, and then your following will come, right?
Yep.
Trying to be something for everybody is what doesn't work, because then you dilute what you potentially can dilute what you're trying to go for, and it's not as authentic.
Yep. I know I struggled with that myself, and partly because I wanted to make such a big impact that it's like, I want to work with everybody. And then I really struggled with, at first, working with women, even though I am a woman, because I never fully stepped into my own feminine. And I went with what was comfortable. I worked mostly my career with men, not as a coach, but just in general. And in some ways as a coach, because working in my old career in nonprofits and supporting nonprofit executives with fundraising, I was working primarily with men and coaching them through the process, in essence. And so I had to, as I step back into my most authentic self, of course I'm a woman, but there's a part of me, there's like this feminine energy within me that needed to come out. And this is why, for me, I resonate with women, and generally women within, 10 to 15 years younger than me and 10 to 15 years older than me, like in a 30, I mean, around the same, but sometimes I have a little bit more and a little bit less. And that I would say that are also already into this work in terms of mindfulness, meditation. So those people that are new to it and have no interest in it, they're not going to resonate with me. And I'm not going to try to convince them, because they're on their own journey, and I want to respect that. I mean, people that were at that retreat, not all of them had took the path that you took, and that is okay. They will take it when they're ready, or they may never take it. Whatever their journey is, it's their journey.
Yeah.
Honor that.
It's interesting you talk about the feminine energy, because when I did, I ended up doing 2 26-day programs on Vancouver Island, those personal development programs I took, which, by the way, don't recommend. It was really intense doing 2 in a row. Because you're really like cracking into your psyche, and then the thing is about doing this work is then you have to participate back in normal life.
You have to integrate it.
The integration can be very tricky, because you just saw and done so much and lived in that really emotional place, and then you come back outside and it's kind of like, I'm a foreigner here. In my own backyard. But something I found, and speaking about working with men and being in a working environment, is I really had this realization in the first program I did, how hard I had become. Like I felt like I had really been living in like a masculine energy, which I think, even if it's not being pushed on you because of a corporate environment, I think as women, sometimes we just put the expectation on ourselves to show up the same as men.
Well, it's about survival, in essence, in an unconscious or subconscious way. I mean, I didn't realize how I stepped into that. Now, I also have a lineage of it. I have a grandmother that was an entrepreneur, had to play by the, masculine rules, a mother who's an entrepreneur, an older sister who's an entrepreneur. So I also, stepped into that role without realizing it, and no blame or fault of their own. I mean, I think about the journey my grandmother went on just to have a business. She couldn't be the business owner when she started the business. My grandfather had to be the owner, and she had to be considered the secretary. She couldn't be the CEO or president at
Wow.
that time. So she had to play by those rules, and realizing that you talk about epigenetics, that was ingrained in me, and realizing that my journey was, I was so out of balance with my masculine and feminine energy, because we have both.
Oh
And I
yeah.
have to bring the
Yeah.
feminine and this again is why, for me, I feel so called to work with women, not necessarily in the same essence that they have to bring their feminine in, but I also think that part of this work of even doing your learning how to have a healthy relationship with your emotions, that's a feminine work. It's the feminine energy. Men can also have a healthy relationship. They need to balance their own feminine side as
Yep.
well.
And we have both, energies in us, masculine and feminine. And yeah, I've really enjoyed coming, like, honoring and kind of honing more of my feminine side in the last couple of years, and just being in my sensuality more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I grew up as a tomboy. I still have probably a bit more masculine energy in me. And I just find I can more easily kind of sway between the two. And yeah, it's cool.
Yep, it's really cool. So before we end, I would love, you and I have had similar stories in that, I mean, I sold all my stuff. I sold my car, got rid of my stuff, packed 2 bags, and brought my Labrador down to Brazil and started a whole new life. Was really called, again, following my intuition, not understanding entirely why. And I've stayed in this country versus you traveled and did a bunch of different things. But that's not always going to be the case for most people. So they might be a mom, they might be, or they could be a husband as well. They could have kids. They could have, they might not have the resources to go and travel to go and find themselves. But what can you recommend? And you might not have anything, so I'm going to throw it out there. Is there something
Sure.
you can recommend? And I think I might know what you're going to say, because you've said it a couple times, for people to start. Really, when I think about being in your power, it's about being in your truth. But most people don't know what that is. Like, well, this is what I've been told is true for me, based on society, family, what I chose to believe as a child about how the world worked and my role in the world. So, what would you suggest they could start doing to help them start to find out what their truth is, and standing in that?
Yeah. Great question. Um, I don't follow a lot of poetry, but the poet Rumi has this quote, and I don't remember it word for word, but it's a short little blurb that's something like, how often do you make regular visits to yourself? And I would say that would be, a big suggestion, is just start getting curious with yourself. Maybe you do 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation in the mornings or before bed, or maybe just take some time to actually breathe, and consciously making a visit to yourself, and checking in, and see what comes up, and write it down, like journaling.
Yep. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, Kyra. Thanks for being a part of my show and for sharing a part of your story.
Thank you so much. This is really heartfelt, and yeah, so amazing to connect this way.
Yeah, I know a lot of people will resonate and will be inspired. And also, I think some people feel like, oh my God, I feel like that. And they'll feel like, okay, I'm normal, because we are normal. We're all
Of
humans.
course.
And we don't, none of us are going through this alone. So
Hmm.
thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kyra. And I hope for some of you that it really resonated with you, just bits and pieces of it. And as I said at the beginning, there's not really one way to do this. So you don't need to go on this big, massive journey and trip in order to make changes in your life, in order to transform your life. You can do it from your own home, from the space that you're in. You just need to shift your environment around. You need to try new things, step out of your comfort zone a little bit, okay? Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one reflective question for you to connect with yourself on a deeper level when it came to this kind of conversation I had with Kyra. And the reflective question is, I want you to think about, have you been getting any pings lately? This is a new kind of word that I've been using through another program that I'm doing, where it's that you're kind of feeling something, like Kyra said, like I just felt something needed to shift in my life, but I didn't know what it was. Are you getting that? Are you getting that little feeling like, wow, something doesn't feel right, or something doesn't feel in alignment, or like, I don't know, something feels off. So it's not bad if it feels off, by the way. It's something pinging you. It's something saying, hey, pay attention here, okay? So I want you to just reflect on that question and just go inward and see for yourself. Take some time, maybe even journal about it. It's just a great opportunity to learn about yourself. So this podcast is a gift, and it's in the spirit of a gift. So if you're interested in supporting this work, please use the link in the show notes to make a contribution. If you'd like to support this podcast on a regular basis, you can also use my Patreon account. So there's a one-time gift or a recurring gift. No matter what you give, even if it's zero, you're all worthy of receiving this message. Don't feel guilty if you can't give anything, but if you can give, then give and support as well. All is welcome. So that's it for today's episode. Remember the African word that I absolutely love, Ubuntu. I am because we are. Bye-bye. Beijos.